You want to see something cool?
Hey, you. You're finally awake.
The Rickroll of gaming. Never gets old. I should probably start the video now. So, what actually is an Elder Scroll? I'm not talking about the individual games in the series, I'm talking about these things. The Elder Scrolls. They turn up periodically in the games, sometimes as background pieces, sometimes as plot devices to unveil information, or sometimes as doohickeys to go hunt for, but I never get the sense an entire game revolves around them. Not in the same way as something like the Amulet of Kings, Totem of Tiber's Septum, or Heart of Lorcan anyway. And the series has plenty of reoccurring elements, so why is everything named after the Elder Scrolls of all things? There's an element of legacy to it, of course. I don't think I could imagine the series being called anything else, but out of everything that they could have chosen as the series' namesake, I also don't think there could have been something else that is as hard to explain. But don't you worry, I'm going to try anyway. But wait, before we go any further, we have to look at this game with AAA visuals on PC and mobile devices. It's got practically as much content as Skyrim and Nexus mods put together, and is doing the kinds of collabs that even the lies of P-devs would be jealous of. I am of course talking about Raid Shadow Legends, and its Echoes of Oz collaboration. It has Wizard of Oz themed champions, like the Cowardly Lion, the Scarecrow, the Tin Woodman, and of course the legendary champion Dorothy Gale, with a very cute Toto in tow. You can get Dorothy for free by logging in for 7 days during the Dorothy Gale chase until the 19th of November, and as part of the event, there's the Ozilda the Wicked dungeon boss, with more rewards than you can shake a stick at. Now for me, Raid does a great job at being dangerously addictive, and scratching that old school JRPG itch, especially when on the move. Plus, Raid has some very striking character designs, and as a fan of the Alice Madness series, I gotta admit, I really do like their version of Alice. Look at her. So, give Raid a go, and click my link in the description or scan the QR code here to get some amazing bonuses, which include the legendary champion Narma the Returned. Plus, we have promo codes for the Cheshire Cat, Pelops the Victor, Grand Oak Paudric, and my favourite, Alice the Wanderer. But get on these quick because these are only valid for the next 48 hours. On top of that too, upon reaching level 15, you'll get this champion, Chonoru. And of course, logging in for 7 days will get you Dorothy Gale. So thank you for Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. Try it today with my link and let's get back to some Elder Scrolls lore.
You have it. The Kell, the Elder Scroll. Tidkrech Kalos. Time shudders at its touch.
So, the Elder Scrolls. Let's start with a basic dictionary definition, and then you'll quickly find how it's not really all that useful. The Elder Scrolls, also known as Kell by the dragons, are scrolls of unknown origin which archive both past and future events. They are sometimes known as Adric prophecies, at least according to the Lost Histories of Tamriel, a book seen in Oblivion, the game, and we don't know how many of these things there are. They apparently do not exist in countable form, whatever that means, and because they exist out of time and space, they can sort of just appear at any moment and at any place. That's about it with the dictionary definition. Scrolls that tell the past and future, and can appear at any place and any time, but we already get a little confused when we actually see the scrolls in games. According to the unofficial Elder Scrolls pages, this is the entire list of all known Elder Scrolls, but that doesn't include theorized Elder Scrolls. Most of the time, or at least as far as I'm aware, Elder Scrolls tend to take the form of these metal cylinders with the actual scroll element having writing in an unknown script and seeming constellations. Oh, and it usually makes you blind too. But that is just what we're used to seeing. The Elder Scrolls can actually be any size, which does make sense if they can appear in any place or time. If they can exist in any space, then why can't they take up any amount of space? One theory suggests that a part of the Adamantine Tower, one of the Towers of Mundus, is an Elder Scroll. In the heart of the tower is a smooth metal core, which apparently is a container for a giant Elder Scroll. Now, if you want to know more about the towers themselves, I've mentioned them in a few videos by now, with the Thalmor video here being the one that explains them best. But long story short, these towers are responsible for stabilising Mundus, the sort of universe of the Elder Scrolls. If this theory about there being an Elder Scroll in the heart of the Adamantine Tower is true, then it could suggest that these Elder Scrolls aren't just out of time and space, but are responsible for stabilising that time and space somehow. Something that could be considered proof for this theory is the Convention, a meeting outside of time, where the gods worked out what to do with the Mundus creation project after finding that Lorcan had tricked them all to make the world. This led to the Magna Gear leaving, smashing through the sky into Aetherius, which made the stars, and Lorcan getting his heart ripped out. But that's not really the important bit. The important bit was that the meeting was out of time and that the Adamantine Tower, the host of this meeting, which could be housing a massive Elder Scroll, can exist out of time, something we know the Elder Scrolls do. Now, I get it, this is already confusing stuff, and don't you worry, it's only going to become more of a head spinner as we go on. It's really impossible to figure out what the Elder Scrolls actually are, and even what they're made out of. The Elder Scrolls are said to be entirely indestructible, according to several sources, such as Serana. Some state that they are fragments of creation outside of time and space, and if you're familiar with many possible origins for the universe the Elder Scrolls exists in, even before Mundus, then this does make some sort of sense. One of the mythic origins for the universe, the Inuad, states that creation was the child of Nir and Anu, and after Nir's death and creation existing for a little bit, there were 12 worlds. Padme, the brother of Anu, and a rival for Nir's love, shattered creation out of envy and knocked the 12 worlds out of alignment, with Anu fighting his brother over the whole affair. Their spilt blood became the Aedra and Daedra, with Anu putting together the broken world into a new one, Nirn. But perhaps the Elder Scrolls are the broken parts of these old worlds and creation itself, which even Padme could not destroy. If you want to know more about that in detail, this Sithis video explains it, but perhaps I'm embarking on a fruitless adventure, trying to explain these Elder Scrolls. According to Paarthurnax, one of the oldest dragons and thus a being almost as old as time itself, the scrolls do not exist, yet always have existed, and he seems to relate them to Akatosh. When we turn up with one, he calls us truly doom-driven, essentially being able to forge our own fate, and says that we are blessed by Akatosh. He also says that we have the very bones of the earth at our whim, likely in reference to the Earth Bones, or Elnathe, divine beings that make up the very rules of the world. In my mind, this more so means that the Elder Scrolls are capable of manipulating time and the reality of the world, rather than being made by the Elnathe or Akatosh. Long story short, we don't know where the scrolls came from, nor why they are around at all. People think they are bits of divinity, are made up of the souls of mortals, and even have a will of their own, essentially being alive and possibly even sentient. It could mean someone is documenting what's happening in the world, or maybe the scrolls are the scholars themselves, documenting everything. Perhaps the scrolls are the documents of Anu, or even the dream journal of the Godhead. But let's not go down that rabbit hole. Instead, let's have a look at trying to read the Elder Scrolls, and that doesn't really make things any easier to understand either.
I've given it a bit of thought. I'd very much like to have those scrolls. Someday I may be able to return them to their rightful place in the Imperial City.
So the most obvious thing the Elder Scrolls do is document the future and past. Prophecies can often be written on them, as was the case with the Tyranny of the Sun prophecy, and chances are, even though you stop Harkon from getting Auriel's bow, a Dragonborn is probably curious enough to blot out the sun at least once. I mean, I did it out of curiosity. gave everyone a right fright. We'll put a pin on this prophecy specifically later, but this is largely the reason why everyone wants to decipher and read these things. Theoretically, if you were able to decipher an Elder Scroll, you would have full access to the information from across time. You could look into the future to see what will happen, or look into the past to discover what has been lost. For instance, if you're an elf, specifically an Outmer, you could use the Elder Scrolls to try and figure out where Hermaeus, the lost land of the elves, is, or rather was. In Dawnguard, we use the scrolls to find the Forgotten Veil and Auriel's bow, so it's theoretically possible. The problem is, reading an Elder Scroll is a monumental pain. Chances are, if you give it a go, you'll go blind, but then again, maybe not. I said before that the Elder Scrolls have a will of their own, and because of this, if you want to read them, you can do it and not go blind if they let you. Still, this seems to be rare, which is why there's an organisation dedicated to deciphering and learning about the Elder Scrolls, the cult of the Ancestor Moth, and their Moth Priests. They have been around for a really, really long time, and it doesn't seem like they've got all that far, to be honest. By really long time, I mean that there are some Nedic texts suggesting that they originate with the Aelids, meaning that, at the very least, the cult of the Ancestor Moth have existed since the early First Era, with a race of elves that are now extinct. These texts suggest that Nedic slaves were forced to tend to the rooms in the White Gold Tower, where the elves would use Ancestor Moths and Canticle trees to do their Elder Scrolls readings, similar to how we do it in Dawnguard. There have been many changes in the modern day, however, even if the name remains the same. While empires have come and gone and full races are now extinct, the Moth Priests have remained in the White Gold Tower, operating in the Imperial Library, also known as the Elder Library. These Moth Priests dedicate themselves to learning all they can of the Elder Scrolls, and while they originally learned to do the readings, in place of their elven masters, to take the burden on their behalf, many a priest still willingly reads the scrolls. No matter the training or preparations, repeated reading of the Elder Scrolls will eventually lead to blindness, something the Moth Priests accept. They have many theories as to why Ancestor Moths aid in being able to read the Elder Scrolls, from being sent by Akatosh to being from Hircine's hunting grounds. The most common of these theories requires quite a bit of context, so I'd maybe shuffle your butt a bit to get comfortable. So, according to the Moth Priests, mortal souls contain Aedric essence, and this is the core of every mortal's existence. In death, the soul dissipates somewhat, with some of this Aedric essence dispersing. Now this essence, which the Moth Priests call Furons, translating to will to peace, has a connection to the fabrics of creation and the destinations after death. Because all souls remain connected, their dispersed essence, the Furons, allow people to receive the knowledge of their ancestors, essentially knowledge from beyond the present. This is how I understand it anyway, and it is said that the Ancestor Moths absorb the Furons. Well, the exact phrasing is imbibe, which means drinking, absorbing the moisture of, or taking in new ideas. Essentially, the Ancestor Moths are a sort of one with the Furons, imbued with the souls of mortality, the memories of the wisdom of the dead. That could be why they are called the Ancestor Moths, since they have the deep well of knowledge of the ancestors and are a sort of soul time capsule, defiant of time in a way. Speaking of time, there is a bit of a connection here with the Moths and Akatosh, since Akatosh produced an oversoul housed with the Amulet of Kings, which had a bit of the soul of every Dragonborn who wore it, thus housing the power of these souls. In a way, these Ancestor Moths are similar, except on a much grander scale. So, how do these soul-imbued moths actually help you read the Elder Scrolls? Well, it is implied in the Nedic texts that talk about the Moth Priest's origins that reading the Elder Scrolls takes a toll on the soul. Hey, that rhymed. So perhaps using the Ancestor Moths and their Furons allow this toll to be dissipated across many, many souls, explaining why the blindness is delayed. The knowledge of the Elder Scrolls is said to exceed the gods, so with the Ancestor Moths' Adric connections and connection to all mortal life that has come before, it helps set people get that reading done. It seems that the Elder Scrolls causing blindness has less to do with the eyes seeing too much and thus stop working, and more so is caused by the immensity of the knowledge causing the eyes to slowly die. You see, when the Moth Priests handle the Elder Scrolls, they ensure that their hands are cleaned of impurities before, after and during the use of these scrolls. They use special cleaning bowls to do this, and residue from the scrolls is left in these bowls, which is known to deaden the hands, just like the Elder Scrolls deaden the eyes. So theoretically, if you keep rubbing your hands on the Elder Scrolls over and over again, your hands would stop working, probably meaning that this is a result of what happens when the scrolls overwhelm the soul. We got an example of this with Dexion, again in Dawnguard, with the Elder Scrolls rendering him blind because he didn't properly prepare, having been too eager, although he isn't entirely sure whether his bout of blindness is permanent or temporary. He seems to have made peace with the idea that he will eventually go blind anyway, like every other Moth Priest, although you might be surprised that a priest from a cult this recluse is all the way in Skyrim doing some adventuring. This is because in year 175 of the 4th era, the same year that the Great War ended, the Elder Scrolls in the Imperial Library vanished. This is likely a result of the Elder Scrolls having wills of their own and collectively deciding it was time for a change in scenery. This could have been in preparation for the events of Skyrim and Dawnguard specifically. It is also interesting that this Adric connection is required to even read the Elder Scrolls in the first place, and this brings me to another point. Everyone wants the secrets that the Elder Scrolls harbour, but not everyone can have them.
Your free will is an illusion. Whether you acknowledge me or not is your own business, but I will be in your mind.
It should be no surprise that Hermaeus Mora really wanted to get his hands, or rather his tentacles, on the Elder Scrolls. But as I mentioned before, it seems that an Adric connection of some kind is required. He has no Adric connection. He's a Daedric prince. Technically the opposite, and if you want to know more about him, well, there's this video. And you know what, while you're there, check out the whole Daedric Prince playlist. But because the Daedric princes lack this connection to the Aedra, Hermaeus Mora needed another way to try and get this knowledge. He was the Daedric Prince of knowledge after all, and we saw how far he went to get the knowledge of the skull from Storn, which should be pretty meagre compared to the collective past and future written in the Elder Scrolls. During the Second Era, Mora had actually managed to get a few, having them float in vats in his realm in Apocrypha, but again had no way of reading them. He of course knew about the connection to the Ancestor Moths with the Elder Scrolls, and researched this connection to try to use them for the reading of the scrolls. Ancestor Moths aren't inherently fans of Daedra, and without them these princes had no way of using the scrolls, but it seems Squid Game here had enough diplomacy skills to reach a bargain with a single Moth. No real information was gained from what I can tell, but the Moths saw that the prince was wise and merciful, and to showcase this, the Moths would wear Mora's eyes on their wings, branded on them by Tentacles McGee, which is why they look the way that they do. They are literally wearing the eyes of Hermaeus Mora, and this is probably why the scrolls were alright with being an Apocrypha in the first place. If Octonerd here is cool with the gatekeeping Moths, then the scrolls are probably cool with him too. Because they have a will of their own, if a scroll doesn't want to be somewhere, it won't be, I think. They also probably have their own plans that we can't yet understand, which is a theme with the series as a whole. One scroll sat in the Tower of Mzark for a ridiculously long period of time, at least since the early First Era, probably waiting for us to grab it so we could use it to learn Dragonrend and fight Alduin. It's implied that this is the same one that was used by Feldir the Old to boot Alduin through time and create a dragon break. You might be asking how this is even possible, since other scrolls haven't showcased its ability to grab a world-eating god and shot-put it through time. Still, the Elder Scrolls do have a will of their own, can be used to change reality, and I like to think that this specific scroll, Elder Scroll Dragon, just hates Alduin. He just hates the guy. He had specific beef with him, which would explain how Feldir could even read the Elder Scroll before the establishment of the Moth Priests, when he spent most of his time learning the Thu'um, not how to read the scroll. Dexion does say it takes a lifetime to learn. Well, it should. Unless you're the Dwemer.
How? How? How?
I don't know!
The Dwemer used the power of science, magic and general bollocks to do basically anything they wanted. This included Zeppelins, they're not called Zeppelins but come on, Zeppelins, robots that could be powered practically indefinitely, and an actual god with a new medium, and yet one of the most impressive creations was the apparatus in the Tower of Mzark. It housed the Elder Scroll, and from a gameplay perspective, it's little more than a puzzle to get the damn thing, but its actual purpose is to transcribe the writings of the Elder Scroll onto a lexicon, these metal cubes. Now this is mental, because it completely overrides the traditional barrier needed to read an Elder Scroll, i.e. a connection with the ancestor Moths. What's even crazier is that, chronologically, this device could have been invented before the founding of the cult of the Moth Priests, although we aren't exactly sure on the timeline. The timeline itself doesn't really matter though. What's more important is that the Dwemer worked out a way to seemingly bypass the whole ancestor Moth thing, while Hermaeus Mora was unable to do this after all this time. This is why the lexicon is a big part of Hermaeus Mora's Daedric quest in Skyrim. Sure, the main goal is to release the Ogma Infinium, but the Calamari King has long coveted the information contained in an Elder Scroll. As we can tell, he has quite literally imprinted himself onto the ancestor Moths. And this lexicon essentially proves that it is possible for him to get this information. Now it should be noted that the Dwemer do have an Aedric connection. Despite attempts to be something else, the Dwemer are in fact mortal, at least they were anyway, and thus have a connection with the Aedra through their souls. With things like Ethereum too, they have access to Aetherius as well. Possibly. We're not quite sure what's going on with that, and this could also link them with the Aedra. If you want to know more about those guys, I do have a Dwemer video that might help fill in some gaps, but I don't mention the Elder Scrolls there because we don't really know what the Dwemer learned from this apparatus. It should have been a lot. The Elder Scrolls hold a truly ridiculous amount of information from the past and future, and could theoretically tell you anything. The Dwemer were capable of so much, and maybe they learned to do some of this from the Elder Scrolls. Perhaps it pointed them to the heart of Lorkhan, since I'm pretty sure we don't know how they discovered it, only that they did. We're also not entirely sure how much information can be transcribed onto these lexicons. When Septimus reads it in Skyrim, he merely tells us that we need the blood of all types of Mer to open the big old box in his outpost, but there's got to be more there. I mean, surely, right? Still, as much as an Elder Scroll can manipulate our world, they can also be manipulated, I think. With them taking a relatively important role in Dawnguard, it does give us quite a bit to look at, so I suppose it's time to address the Verther in the room.
A prophecy that lacked a single final ingredient, the blood of a pure vampire. The blood of a daughter of Cold Harbour!
A big part of Dawnguard involves doing a bit of scroll hunting, and with the 3 we find, we use them to uncover the location of the Forgotten Veil and Auriel's bow. Earlier we learned that the scrolls had revealed a prophecy that would blot out the sun, something that obviously appeals to vampires, and that Harkon got obsessed with this prophecy. The Elder Scrolls revealing this prophecy made it seem pretty concrete, but when we waddle all the way over to the Forgotten Vale after reducing the Falmer population something fierce, and deal with the dragon Chuckle Brothers, Vurtha does a villain speech, as all villains do. It gets revealed that Vurtha had made the Tyranny of the Sun prophecy public knowledge, and that, over time, it became told by the Elder Scrolls, came into Harkon's knowledge, all according to plan. Vurtha, feeling abandoned by Auriel after being turned into a vampire, wanted to blot out the sun in revenge, and everything went to plan until Serana turned up with a walking dragon nuke called John Skyrim, with Vurtha quickly learning that there are in fact levels to this. Also, this happens. Serana picks him up like he's a toddler. That's embarrassing, after all that planning. But that's not the important thing. The important thing is that you can potentially manifest something into the Elder Scrolls if you try hard enough. Vurtha was fueled by untold amounts of hate and patience, but it also could have been that the prophecy was meant to happen. Vurtha had the bow, and needed the blood of a daughter of Cold Harbour, and fate decreed that he would have been successful. The Elder Scrolls dictated that the sun would be blotted out, but we stopped it from happening. Now this could be because the Elder Scrolls were actually working with Akatosh or Auriel to put a stop to Vurtha's madness by getting us to go over to the Forgotten Vale. When Paarthurnax sees us with an Elder Scroll, he calls us blessed by Akatosh, and even the Moth Priests think there's some sort of a connection between Akatosh and the Elder Scrolls. It's also noted that we could be exempt from fate, similarly to the other protagonists in Elder Scrolls games. Remember when Paarthurnax calls us doom-driven, which I mentioned before. That is where it came from, and we are defying fate, prophecy, and even the Elder Scrolls by absolutely dunking on Vurtha. It's really impossible to know since communicating with the Elder Scrolls isn't something that's easy to do. We can't make more Dwemer lexicons, and the Ancestor Moths seem to be the gatekeepers to reading the scrolls, more so than even the Moth Priests. And after thousands of years, I don't think they've made a massive amount of progress to learning about the scrolls. They have yet another piece of ES lore that is meant to be beyond comprehension, and this is a really surface level look at them from me, since diving any further would be the deepest of all rabbit holes. It's also worth noting that the perception of the Moth Priests and the information gained from the Elder Scrolls isn't really that well respected by mortals in the modern-ish era. Okato, the potentate who took over after the Septim Dynasty ended, states that the Elder Scrolls and the Moth Priests don't really give him much practical information. I guess politicians don't have time for mystic prophecies, although the Elder Scrolls have been used to get out of divine curses, as was the case in the Oblivion Thieves Guild questline, where we steal an Elder Scroll to rewrite history so that Deraloth never stole the Great Cowl from Nocturnal. It also opened up a time wound in Oblivion, so messing around with time is a theme with the scrolls, and maybe being older than literal time, Akatosh, means that they can bend his rules. Still, with something as old as the Elder Scrolls, it's tough to know what they want and how sentient they actually are. It could be a Hist situation, where they are sort of a hive mind, or they could be fully individual. Just don't think that they're merely invincible pieces of paper. They are so much more, to the point where they don't make any sense. But hey, what in the Elder Scrolls actually does?
Reason number 2. Look what I can do.
But what does that have to do with anything?
No. He's got a point.
Thanks for watching this dive into the Elder Scrolls, both the series and the actual items. They are baffling and can be filed under something so difficult to explain that they might as well be plot-changing MacGuffins. Sometimes a game series' namesake makes sense in very simple ways. We can look at examples from other fantasy RPG IPs. Baldur's Gate is named after the city, Divinity is about becoming divine, The Witcher follows a witcher as its protagonist, and Monster Hunter is about hunting monsters. All pretty simple stuff. The Elder Scrolls are something more complicated, but perhaps they are documenting or are the documentation of everything happening in the series. In them are the writings of our accomplishments, the adventures of the doom-driven prisoners, unleashed. Well, the real reason is that Bethesda wanted to make the series sound more like a book, giving it a more RPG series feel, when it transitioned from an action title. Yeah, Arena was originally going to be an action game, not an RPG, although it's probably a good thing that it turned out the way it did. This does mean the name Elder Scrolls was a retroactive choice, so, you know, it's all anticlimactic really. Still, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please do the whole YouTube ritual of liking, commenting and subscribing. Thanks again to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. Don't forget to use my link if you're looking to give it a go for all those free goodies, and hopefully I'll see you in another video later down the line.